If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard in Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place.
Mr. Daniels, I assure you, you are not the first out-of-touch old man to not believe in me. But I will make damn sure you are the last. Now let me take this time to formally introduce myself to you, Chris. My name is Brodie Lee, and I am the Exalted One.
Welcome, everybody, to PWZ for Monday, December 28th. Welcome.
Hey, guys.
And hope you had a wonderful Christmas. A few more days for the new year. And we are going to sit here and talk the world of professional wrestling over the past weekend. A couple tragic moments. We lost several big names in the history of the sport of the business. One, Mr. Brodie Lee, and the former 8-time NWA Junior Heavyweight Champion, Danny Hodge, known for being able to crush apples with his bare hands, even at 88 years old.
Yeah, and we're also, a little later on, we're going to also talk about a female wrestler who passed away a little over a week ago, probably about a week or two ago, Kitty Adams. She wrestled in Madison Square Garden many times. I felt that she should be mentioned. This is no other media outlets are really talking about her. And we're going to actually have a special guest. Her grandson is going to be on, who's also a wrestler, Mark Tendler, trained under Dory Funk Jr., actually. So we got a lot to talk about, dude.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. First, let's get going with some, what's his face? Danny Hodge. He's a wrestler. He had a very successful amateur wrestling career. Even made it to the Olympics where he won a silver medal. He was gypped out of a win, basically by. I was listening to Observer Radio, and they mentioned this. And you can find that. I think there was on YouTube. You can find the footage that. I guess he was going for a move. He was going for a roll through, and the referee made a really bad call and counted it as a pin. Now, mind you, this is a guy that was never on his back throughout his entire amateur wrestling career. And this one match, he went through for a roll through, and the ref counted it as a pin. Even the guy that he wrestled, the Bulgarian gentleman, stated that that wasn't a pin, but they stuck with it and gave him the silver medal.
So that's one of the first screw jobs that we know of, anyway.
An amateur wrestling.
I shouldn't say one of the first because there were so many back in the early 1900s and around the turn of the century. But I'm no historian. I'm not going to go down a list because I'm no historian. But Danny Hodge, unfortunately, and not for bad reasons, but he kind of got the short end of the media stick with his passing because unless you heard about it within the first 4 or 5 hours of the news breaking, an even bigger modern story broke when word got out that John Huber, a.k.a. Brodie Lee, a.k.a. Luke Harper, passed away. And that kind of got that got a little more fanfare for obvious reasons. It is important to mention Danny Hodge.
He was a modern-day wrestler, Brodie, and he was pretty relatively important in the last. But we'll get to him. I want to talk a little bit about Danny still.
Yeah, I just wanted to.
Because like I said, I don't feel like outside of guys like the Observer or whatever, I don't think that he got enough attention regarding his passing and his career.
And that's the point. That's my point with that comment. It's like he kind of, if you didn't hear about it in the first couple hours, it was forgotten by social media and everybody else. Danny Hodge, don't forget, he was actually a mentor to one of the most influential figures in the business right now, Jim Ross.
Right. I actually heard this, an interview with Ross and him stating that Danny Hodge, while he was coming up in Mid-South Wrestling, excuse me, Jim Ross was coming up in Mid-South Wrestling. Danny was basically very protective of him and basically saying, hey, that's my guy. Don't mess with him, basically. And he put a lot of guys in their places, guys that were trying to rib. And, when JR is coming in paying his dues, always people like to, I guess, harass or bully or haze the young guys. Danny Hodge was not having any of that when JR was coming. This is before JR became a commentator. He was a referee for Bill Watson Mid-South. He basically had credited with Hodge and Bill Watson as taking care of him while he was young. Also in 2007, part of the Cauliflower Alley Club, Hodge was given the Lou Thez Award, which is pretty freaking incredible. Legit shooters do get that award, and Danny Hodge was a legit shooter.
What I was going to say is he came from an era of real badasses. I mean, legit badasses. The guys who back in that era, the promoters, if they were going to put a title on you, and they put he did, like you said, he had quite a few titles, quite a few reigns, I should say. They're going to put a title on you. You best be the guy who can defend himself if something were to break out in public, because they didn't want. And that was before the days of social media. Now think about that.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, they were so protected back then.
It's not protected today. People use their real names on social media, but then they'll be like, or their handle name will be like the WWE name, while their real name is actually the display name. Speaking of that, you're saying that it come from a bygone era of legit tough guys. This is a guy that broke his neck in a car accident and basically broke through the window and swam to the surface, holding his neck with one hand, holding his neck in place, and basically swimming up with the other until he got to the surface and laid down. And that's where a passerby came in and helped him. And then, that's where the rest of the story goes in. He's known as one of the toughest guys. I guess when somebody was interviewing, I believe it was Jim Ross, was interviewing Lou Thez, and they asked about who the toughest wrestlers, toughest shooters are in the history of the business. He named all these guys, and then he goes, well, what about Danny Hodge? And he goes, oh, you mean to tell me legit guys? So he didn't include that because he was basically hyping it up for guys that were known. Then he didn't really, then he went in and just basically said Danny Hodge is the toughest out of them all. You just don't mess with him,
Yeah, and it's a shame that guys like that, it just happens over time that, if you went to, and I know there's no arena shows right now, but if you went to an average arena show, or let's say you go to an AEW taping, since they are bringing in live audiences right now, small, and you go around and poll people about their knowledge of Danny Hodge, they're probably going to say, who are you talking about? And that kind of stinks, but that's just the way life is, unfortunately.
You think people over here, and I know for a while, guys like that were not necessarily popular in the United States still.
Right.
In Japan, they had a longevity that went above and beyond for even decades. People weren't worried about Lou Thez here in the 80s or 90s. But in Japan, He was a legend. He wrestled his last, Lou Thez wrestled Masahiro Chono in his final match. I think, what was it? Was that 1995? Around there? So it just shows you the cultural difference over how people treat their, legit shooters, legit professional wrestlers as, people over here in the United States like characters. And as opposed to the Japanese have always treated it like it was a legitimate sport and, a competitive sport. And that's why I like that a whole lot.
No, that's a great point. We treat them more like, and I think the 80s really made it worse in terms of that, but we treat them like characters. And unfortunately, and I'm a sucker for a good character, but unfortunately, if somebody doesn't have a gimmick or a character, they're probably not going to be, remembered for a long time.
Right. I mean, that's
you put some way out there. Gotta be a little lazy. That's your dude.
But it goes to show you, legitimately, I think that's all Vince McMahon, because he was looking for a way to make it more mainstream, and creating over the top characters was the way that he was able to do it, and cartoon type characters was the way that he was able to do it here in the United States. And that's just how it exploded here in the United States. As like I said, in Japan it was a whole different thing, and they were doing gigantic arenas compared to us, like Madison Square Garden. Like they were doing that on the regular, like on a basically weekly basis.
Which it's funny because now that I think about it, Monday Night Raw is actually going on as we record. Thanks, Rick. I can't watch Raw.
I've got it on in the background. You might need to get a little television or cable app or something.
I'm not making the big money off the PWZ podcast like you are, but anyway. No, but
Someday,
seriously,
brother.
Now unless they're going to throw something in the middle of the show, WWE did throw up a Luke Harper graphic at the beginning of the show, but unless I missed something, or they're going to do later on, I haven't seen any mention of Danny Hodge. Which, again, it shows you how far he is removed from this generation. I would imagine Jim Ross will have something on AEW, or at least he'll speak about him in commentary at some point.
I'm assuming that he will talk about him this coming Wednesday. He was very good friends with him as well, so I'm assuming that that's going to take place. I don't know if WWE did anything about Danny Hodge, but I know I saw like a little clip on YouTube right before we started here. I missed the first half hour of Raw, but right before we started, I saw there was the graphic for the other guy, John Huber. I'm sorry, Brodie Lee, to forget who you were. I'm sorry for that 1 second. So,
well, with all due respect, he has three names that he's been known as in recent years. So it gets a little dicey sometimes, but I did see the AEW, and I don't know if we're going to transition off of Danny Hodge at this point or not.
Yeah.
But I will mention I just read that Tony Khan was tweeting that AEW is going to do something real special in honor of John Huber on Wednesday night. Brodie Lee. He's going to actually have a team, and you might have to help me here. It was Cody Rhodes, 10 from Dark Order, and who was and Orange Cassidy, I think. Right? They're going to be teaming up. Because if you hadn't heard that,
no, I haven't.
All right, Tony Khan broke that news because those were three of Brodie Lee's favorite guys. Okay. So as a special tribute to him, they're going to team up one night only type of thing.
Okay, I think that this is going to be quite enjoyable. Not enjoyable, but I think it's going to be. AEW has a way of doing things, and I just have a feeling the way that they're going to do it is going to be pure class. You know what I mean? They're going to do it because they're already handling the situation really well. According to what I have read, he had been in the hospital for quite some time in ICU for the last couple months. Now, I guess it wasn't brought out. His wife wanted it private. So journalists, obviously guys like, I guess AEW respected that. And didn't tell anybody. I guess Alvarez, the Observer, was not aware of it, but they were made aware of it. I guess yesterday on the podcast that I was listening to. Go ahead.
I got to correct you on that. There's no way it could have been a couple of months, at least not consistently, because I think it was November 7th was the dog collar match, correct? So he was on TV as recently as November 7th. So you're talking just over about a month and a half.
That's about. Yeah, so almost 2 months, a month and a half, almost 2 months. But he, ever since that match, he had not been on television at all. So it must have been like right after that. I guess he was having some sort of lung issues. Now I wonder if that explains why they took the belt off him, the TNT title off of him. That was
it may.
Yeah.
But there was also once word leaked out about his the tribute they did where his son defeated Kenny Omega in a dark situation. It all kind of started adding up, like not to be I Spy in this whole thing, but like it just seemed pieces started coming together on that, and it seems like AEW is extremely respectful and all that, and it seems as though I don't know if he shared it with a lot of people because it seems like so many people who are close to him are just stunned by all this.
Bray Wyatt did a really nice tribute on his Instagram as well. I'm not sure if you saw that. It was
Rowan did too. Yeah.
really. Yeah, I mean, him and Rowan, I thought were an incredible tag team for two gigantic men. I liked the way Rowan worked, and I thought that if you look at Brodie, the way he moved for a guy his size was just incredible. He, a lot of people say that he was influenced by Bruiser Brody in his style, but he, which you could see, and he did admit, but he also took the name Brody. This is a rumor. I don't know how true this is, but I read this today that he took that name Brody from Mallrats, Jason Lee's character in Mallrats, which I thought was incredible. I thought that was that shows you the kind of humor that he had. You know what I mean? If that's where he took that name from.
You know, I mean, I know we talked about this throughout the day today, and even last night, and you know, I told you a lot more people who had a lot more insight and who a lot more people care about than us have discussed this to no end today. And I've appreciated reading all the tributes, and I've enjoyed. You know, I guess enjoyed is a tough word to use, but you know, I've appreciated. I will say this, and I know Big E touched on it again. I always liked Brodie Lee. I'm not going to say I was his biggest fan. I know a lot of people come out times like this, you know, all of a sudden they're the biggest fan. No, but I certainly enjoyed his work. I liked him a lot, and I thought he had potential to be maybe a new age Bruiser Brody, even if that wasn't his vision. But when Big E tweeted after the when he and Big E. Or excuse me, Brodie Lee, I think, tweeted after the George Floyd murder when America just had enough of all the nonsense.
Racial hate.
And Brodie Lee broke character, working for another company, and talked about, you know, seeing his, you know, hating this for his brother Big E and seeing how much it hurt him. And it just, that made me look at him in a whole different light, because now I'm like, he's a real dude, man. Like, he really cares about his friends. He really cares about people. But that's my opinion, whatever. But sad, very sad.
He was a very big family man. A lot of pictures have been shared over the, I guess, the last 24 hours with his family, you know, his wife, his kids, and every picture you've seen, he looked very happy with his children. You know what I mean? He looked like he loved his family. He loved spending time with them. And, you know, I think it was a picture that he had the AEW title with his, he was holding it with his mother. Did you see that picture?
I have not.
No, it was just, you know, he just looked like he was happy. He loved his mom. He just seemed like a really amazing guy, according to all the stories that have come out in the last 24 hours regarding him and his friendship and his kindness and him being like one of the greatest people in the business today.
Yeah, it'll definitely be missed, and you know, we'll have to see what AEW brings to the table Wednesday. But I agree with you. I think they're going to do it right. I think they're going to probably, you know, you'll probably see some of the regular storylines and angles carry on, but I think their focus is going to be more on, you know, honoring their brother. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I'm looking forward to that.
I'm looking forward to seeing it. I don't want to say I'm necessarily excited, but you know,
it's going to
be an emotional episode, or you know, presentation. I'm sure. Much like you have to think back when like Owen or Eddie died, and they did the tribute to like those guys, and you know, they just had the whole roster out there just making comments in between matches and such. And you know, I wouldn't be surprised if I teared up a little bit watching this, because, you know, you're looking over there, looking through the social media over the last couple of days. You know, it is heartbreaking. It's incredible that something like this would happen to a guy his age, you know.
Yeah, that Owen episode will forever be like tattooed in my heart. You know what I mean? That the Mark Henry poem was that's what stays with me to this day. Well, just a random thought out of left field, that it really doesn't matter one way or the other. But I wonder if we might see Rowan even come out Wednesday night. You know, kind of like a little tie-in tribute.
He's not signed to the big one across the river, so you know it could happen. I wouldn't be surprised if he came out for a tribute. You know, I haven't seen him do much work since he started, other than taking place in the UWN World Championship Tournament. That's about it.
He's
So
he's certainly out there signing a lot of autographs. I know that because they're all over the place. But anyway,
you gotta ask your boy. Anyways, so we're going to be joined by Mark Tendler in just a few more minutes. Is there anything else that you want to cover up before we get to him?
No. Trying to think of what else is going on in the wrestling. I mean, we're coming off the holidays, so it's usually a pretty quiet time. Unfortunately, the tragedies, this week changed that a little bit. But usually, this is a pretty dead period in pro. No pun intended. It's a very quiet period in pro wrestling, I should say. That's a better word.
Yeah, they usually try to end the year out with something really good. I guess they did that on Friday night. I did not watch SmackDown. I have it on my DVR, but Big E, I guess, was it 3 title matches? And 2 of them changed hands or something like that?
3 title matches, and apparently, and again, I haven't seen it either. I'll be honest with you. Apparently, Daniel Bryan and Jey Uso tore the house down in addition to those 3 title matches.
That's what I heard, yeah.
Big E won the Intercontinental belt, which, everybody's waiting for Big E to get that big singles push. Hopefully, that's the next step.
I think
and it also came in off. You think that's as high as going to go?
No, I think this is it. I think that this is when it's finally. Not for nothing. This probably should have happened about a good 5 years ago. The Big E getting a push, because I mean, it's not like the guy isn't talented and wasn't deserving. But I guess when he went from NXT to the main roster, he was pretty talented in NXT, wouldn't you say?
Yeah,
and then he comes to the main roster, and he was kind of just like most people when they come from NXT. They have trouble getting over to the mainstream audience, right? And so he was just kind of there, and then he got teamed up, and finally he got over when he was joined up with the other guys, with the New Day. So, I think that this, he could have gotten over. I don't know if maybe they gave it more time as himself, but now he's got this. So I think that by Mania, we could see him at this level. Right now he's here, the Intercontinental title. He could be up here in just a couple months, personally thinking.
It's funny because he's a typical case. He gets to the main roster, and they put him in a very unassuming role. Was he Dolph's bodyguard at first? Or he came in as
something, yeah.
I think so. And so he was basically a background player. You know what I mean?
Right.
And he never cut promos. So your initial reaction as a fan is like, this guy must not be able to cut a promo. He must have no charisma. Well, right. I think it's pretty obvious all these years later, Big E's one of the most charismatic guys on the roster, and he can cut a promo. Back
then, who that was watching Monday Night Raw, how many people were actually watching NXT, too, and paying attention to it? Because it wasn't on cable. It was on the network. You know what I mean? A lot of people weren't going over to... I still know a lot of people that don't subscribe to the network. They'll actually pay for the pay-per-views, if they watch the pay-per-views at all. It's mind-boggling, but that's besides the point.
But and this one isn't just about Big E; it's about all the New Day members. Kofi too, because he went through that stage, and he kind of stepped in it and got got catapulted to the top a little quicker for a brief moment. But when New Day started, it was almost like we were all watching it. We're like, this is wrestle crap, right? That was the first thing we thought. This is destined for wrestling. And those 3 guys, to their credit, they did the unthinkable. They made it work.
Right.
And they all got to shine with their personalities, and they all got to stand out as individuals within a group. And now with the split, it still works. Even if they're not together, it still works. You know what I mean? And on pay-per-view, they can kind of come back together once in a while. I think Big E escorted his teammates out on the last pay-per-view, so they can still kind of do cute little things like that. You know what I mean?
So something definitely can happen on pay-per-view where they're all together at a time. So we'll just have to see what happens going on down the road. All right, so we got Mark Tendler coming up in just a minute. Hang on, we'll be back.
King of the ring.
All right, everybody, please welcome to PWZ, Mr. Mark Tendler. How are you, sir?
It's going good. It's going. Hey, how's everybody doing this evening? Really
Fantastic.
enthusiastic about being on this show. It's something new for me. It's not very often that I get to be do an interview with a bunch of folks such as you guys.
Can should we call you Mark or should we call you Death Mark?
Call me that's everybody knows me by. I got the following all the way clear down from Florida all the way up to here to West Virginia. So it's a big name.
Now we're gonna be talking about your grandmother who recently passed away. She wrestled at Madison Square Garden many times, actually. Kitty Tendler. But just briefly, let's talk about you a little bit. So now you're from the Florida scene originally. Now you trained under Dory Funk, is that correct? Dory Funk Jr., correct?
Two people. I actually trained under my grandmother and Dory Funk Jr.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. And
Wow.
yeah, Bang Wrestling, right?
Yeah, I was born.
You can actually find video. You can find video of him of Mark and his grandmother at a Bang Wrestling TV show. Pretty cool stuff.
Awesome. They still run TV? Bang?
Yeah, Bang TV.
They do?
Yeah.
Is it online at all?
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Okay, I'm going to have to look it up. Cool.
Yeah, I
Now,
got
Mark-
some of my personal videos on there. I've actually worked with a bunch of here now, and I also started my own promotion, as y'all can tell. I've been in the business since I was 14. I'm 28
Oh, wow.
now, so I had my first match back when I was 15 years old. I've wrestled with a bunch of huge names. As a matter of fact, I just got done doing a show. I want to say about 2-3 months ago. I wrestled with Kerry Morton, which is Ricky Morton's son.
Yep.
I wrestled with Caleb Conley from TNA.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'm going to be trying to do a show with Mambo Taliona, which is from Pennsylvania. That's February 13th. Then I'm also looking to get Shane Douglas in as well.
Okay,
Good
cool.
guy. Shane's a good guy.
Oh,
You
yeah.
ever make it up to the Northeast at all?
I'm actually in West Virginia right now.
Okay.
Rick,
Yes, sir.
if I'm not mistaken, Mark does have ties to the Connecticut area, I think.
I do have time.
Okay. How's that?
It's great. I got a bunch of buddies of mine. They were, as a matter of fact, 2 friends of mine. They are insanely rude.
Yeah. Weren't they trained by Paul Roma?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
they work for Northeast Wrestling. Yeah,
Yes.
I've seen them.
Actually,
yeah.
a very good friend of mine, very good, close friend of mine. We went to high school together. Justin Del Rio, who runs What's Up Wrestler.
Nerds of Wrestling is this
Yep.
Facebook page. Yeah, he's a nice guy. He was supposed to appear on the podcast a few months back, but scheduling got messed up. So
Great.
Yeah, he's a very busy guy.
That's the truth.
Mhm.
Always on the run.
Now, do you ever go back up to the Northeast to work any shows or?
Not really. I've been trying to stay in the local area. I'm trying to see what the local scene's about, which there's a lot of people in this local area that they're really interested in me. Like I went to I did a show for Premier Wrestling League. That was my first show here in West Virginia. I was in a battle royal. And they were like, "Man, you really know your stuff." I'm like, "Yeah, I've been doing it for a long time. I've been in the business. I've been working constantly, honing your craft to make sure, you get people like I said, Shane Douglas to notice you. I've got guys that I've got promoters that are say, hey, come work for me. And now this is not my first promotion that I've owned and operated. I actually ran with Knockout Wrestling down in Florida. I was the COO for that company. I ran with Ocala Championship Wrestling, which is now called Original Championship Wrestling. I ran with that. I booked their first 4 shows. And now the shoe's on the other foot where I'm the promoter asking people to, hey, come see me, come work for me. And, there's a bunch of names here in the local area that I'm really fond of. Like there's a gentleman, he's called the Face of Death, Zayden Kane. I'll put him over any day of the week. Good guy, down to earth man, but I'll tell you what, when it comes to ring time, he's serious. And when he's serious, he's That's how it's going to. That's how it's going to go, and that's how it's going to be. Then you have people like people that's been in the business, such as Marshall Law, a nice guy. Now he's been in the business for 30 plus years, but he's never touched the light of pros. He's only been on the independent scene, which I mean honestly, that man deserves to be in the pros. He's seen he's put guys over that haven't heard names of in a long time. It's different to see what the atmosphere is here in West Virginia versus what it is down in Florida. I see. Now, between us three men, down in Florida, I've come to realize that most of the promotions outside of some of the ones that I've worked for, a lot of prima donnas. They want it their way and how they want it.
Right.
I'm used to the back in the early 80s, the early 90s, raised around this. It's what the promoter wants and how it's going to be done. Now that's what I'm to. So versus now the early 80s and 90s promoting shows that's the way it's up here in West Virginia. It's actually vice versa down in Florida where some of the guys in the back are getting all rights to creativity, which sometimes the creativity that they get goes in the opposite direction that they're planning on.
Right.
Now, Rick, you do have to understand something about Mark or Death Mark here. His lineage in this business is pretty deep. Like I mentioned earlier, his grandfather trained my uncle many years ago, and honestly, there's another guy you might have heard of that his grandfather helped train. It's probably a bunch of them, actually. But I'm going to throw another one. Long Island legend Mick Foley.
Yep.
His first trainer was Mark Tendler. It's in his book. If you read Have a Nice Day, he talks about Mark Tendler in the book.
Hang on, I'm not sure if I've ever heard of that. You mean this guy? That guy?
That'd be the guy. That's
that guy. Sorry, I had to break that.
No. It's funny because Mark, I'm not going to get deep into like your grandfather, who unfortunately left us earlier than he should have. But I remember reading about it in Foley's book, and he mentioned that the guy worked at an establishment and something happened. And I remember hearing that story, and I said to my uncle, I says, hey, I'm reading Mick Foley's book. There's a guy, and his name's Tendler, Mark Tendler. My uncle said, oh, yeah, that's the guy who trained me when I was my uncle was a Russian wrestler named Boris Sinkov.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And he was trained, and it's funny because he had a black brother named Ivan Sinkov. So I always like to think that maybe Bully Ray, another Suffolk County guy, might have seen it. Yeah. Or somebody, and that's where the Dudleys came from. It's all in my head, but I like to think that. Yeah. But anyway, so his grandfather was a and he's wrestled at Madison Square Garden a lot of times too.
Actually, there's more that you may have forgot to mention. That's Sandman. Sandman.
Really?
Yes. Yep. They trained at Ronnie Rod's in Long Island, New York.
Okay.
They moved it. Now it's in the actual center section of New York. I got asked to go work there when I was up there in Connecticut, and I was like, well, I can't really travel at the moment. So, and then I haven't really reached out that far yet. I'm thinking about doing it maybe this coming year or not. But there's my main focus right now is to get a huge hit on Outlaw. That's my main focus outside of my own wrestling career.
Now you hear about pro wrestling power couples, right, Rick? You hear about Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch, and Tyson Kidd and Natalia and stuff. No, I'm serious. I'm being serious.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe they weren't main eventers, but you go back a few generations and you had Mark Tendler and Kitty Adams, and I don't know if that was publicly known at the time because back then they kept a lot of that stuff secret behind the scenes. But Kitty Adams, you could find the YouTube footage. She was teaming with Moolah in Madison Square Garden. I mean, tell us a little bit more about Kitty.
Susan Green. So, from 1971 to the early years of 92, my grandmother had her last match in Florida in the year of 92. So from 71 to, I want to say, 84, 85 maybe, she was tagging with Moolah everywhere. They, as far as Nagasaki, Japan, all
wow.
that. So, as a matter of fact, I actually still have my grandmother's first travel bag from Japan.
That's crazy. Wow.
And the
That's
best
awesome.
part, it still has the original flight ticket on it, on the actual handlebar from when they traveled to Japan. Due to my grandmother's recent passing, it was really rough because, some of the newer generation female workers or wrestlers, I should say, excuse my language, but they can't grasp the concept of a story. Okay. And that was one thing that my grandmother wanted to instill in me. If you can't tell a story in a match by doing the simplest things, you're not getting anywhere. That's one thing that I will always cherish to me. It's the point to where she would look me in the face. She says, "I'm going to give you a suplex in the middle of our living room, and I'm going to tell a story doing it." Man, it was something else because, you would never think a 72-year-old woman lifting a 175-pound man, like grown man, in a vertical suplex standing in the living room. Who does that? Who does that?
It's amazing.
Right.
And, she was telling, we were sitting having coffee one morning. She was telling me about a match she was doing with Moolah. And she was actually, I think she was working against, I want to say it was a second part of the St. John and Susan Green. She was having the hardest time getting heat. The promoter coming to her, she goes, "Kitty, I don't want you to do the Italian salute." Why? Because we're in Little Italy, in New York, in the middle of the ring, and she looked at the promoter. She's like, "How am I supposed to get heat? Like, how am I supposed to do this?" And I kid you not, it wasn't even 10 minutes of walking out that curtain. She's pulling the Italian salute out. You see her doing this number, and I'm telling you, she was getting heat left and right. She told me she had tomatoes thrown at her, beer cans thrown at her, all kinds of crazy stuff.
Wow.
That same night, it was not even 10 minutes in the match. You find her with Moolah stripping the ref in the middle of the ring. Like, they had this man down to his skivvies and everything. It was as soon as she told me, I was like, "This is funny. This is absolute. That's storytelling right there."
That's funny, man.
That's funny. That's awesome.
Now, was she trained? Was she trained by Moolah?
Yes.
Okay.
She was trained by Moolah down in South. I think it was South or North Carolina.
South Carolina, yeah.
There's a guy on Facebook that actually asked me. He messaged me directly. He goes, "Hey, I'm such and such person from the Fabulous Moolah School." I was like, "Oh, really?" So they actually did a snippet on my grandmother and myself on how the lineage is passed down. I've actually, I did a show with her at Dory Funk's school, and me and her, we were talking, and like, well, it was time for me to step out of that school. So I actually branched out from that school, and then she helped me get my foot on the ground to promoting, as well as wrestling with myself. She taught me a few rules that I'm gonna constantly follow by. And with the knowledge that she's passed down and instilled in me, it's something different. It's not every day that you get to, who in their right mind gets to go to school one day and say, "Hey, your grandmother does this." Well, guess what? My grandmother's a pro wrestler. And you know the faces that I would get all the time, like, "Hey, what? Are you serious?" And next day you would bring in a magazine with her face on the front of it. It's not every day you get to see that kind of thing, and it's hard to see that she's gone and to see how far I've come into this business. And I still to this day get people, "Hey, can you book her for a show?" I'm like, "I can't." I got one just the other day. They asked me to book her for a. You guys ever heard of the Cauliflower Ear down in Texas?
Oh, yeah.
They asked me to book her there, and I was like, "Well, I can't. She's passed away." And they're like, "Oh, that's sad to hear." Actually, I'm going down to Florida in June. They're supposed to have a Legends Luncheon, and they asked me to come down there and
Cool.
Is that the one run by Brian Blair? Or
Yep.
He's involved in that? Yep.
Yep.
Right.
That would be the guy.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's awesome.
Guy too. I've met him. I went to a Legends Luncheon with her before. I met Gerald Briscoe.
He's a good guy. Yeah.
Yeah, I've actually did a show with Wes Briscoe.
Okay.
With the Dory Funk School. Nice guy, real nice guy, down to earth, dude. Like super down to earth.
Those luncheons look amazing. I know Bob Cook puts them over all the time.
Oh man,
He's a part. He's a part of that, right? A part of
think
that
so,
organization.
yeah.
Like a big. Yeah, he's always talking about him, and he's always got a lot of really great stuff to say about that stuff.
Oh yeah, those luncheons are amazing. As a matter of fact, a good buddy of mine, Mark Beavis, he is the head ref for Knockout. He actually gets invited to those every time. Okay. And he goes. He asked me to come down last time. I was like, well, I can't really make it. It's a little bit of a rough time at the moment.
Right. Now I wanted to ask you too. There was a lot of heat on Moolah in the last few years. Stories started coming out after she died about how she treated some of the women she worked with and such. Was your grandmother? Did she remain in contact with Moolah until Moolah passed? Were they still friends?
I know they would talk every now and then, but it was not. I mean, it wasn't on a regular basis because as soon after '92 hit, my grandmother completely stepped away from the business. Like she pretty much cut ties until I actually started embarking, professional wrestling. Matter of fact, a good friend of hers, you gentlemen may know him, Larry Zabisco.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, real nice guy. He actually brought me into my first show and actually got to sit in and watch how the whole undermining of the show, how it actually works. And actually watch them set up the ring, take it down, everything like that. And she talked to Larry, sometimes, not all the time, but Larry is one of the reasons why I wrestle on top of, keeping the lineage together. Someone told me that my grandmother's heritage dies with me. Little do they know, I have 2 kids that are fascinated by the world of professional wrestling. It's not
That's
dying.
amazing.
Oh yeah, I got a daughter that's 6 and I got a son that's 2. So my daughter watches me, or excuse me, let me correct myself. She is 7. She would shoot me if
At that age,
You're in trouble now, dude.
It's important at that age to get those ages right because they will remind you. Trust me, I got a 5-year-old that reminds me every day how old he is.
Yeah.
So,
You sure he's 5?
Yeah,
I mean, he tells me so.
But getting back to your Dory days, how was your experience in the Dory Funk dojo?
the Funkin' Conservatory.
Yes.
It was great. There was a bunch of other students there. Really, all the students, they took me in. They took me in like a family I never had. You got a bunch of guys. Matter of fact, you got Derek Steele, which is now, he's a huge power lifter. Really nice guy. He'll cut, tell you cut and dry. You have Gabriel Zimmerly, aka Gabe Zilla. He's on the local Florida scene. He's a nice dude too. Like I said, cut and dry. I'll tell you how it is. They helped us. They introduced us to a lot of high name workers, wrestlers. For example, we did a show with Awesome Kong.
Nice.
She really nice lady. After the show, she's like, "Man, you have this. It's like natural to you." I'm like, "Yeah, it's just natural. It just comes to me instantly. It's like I was born for it." And I wasn't trying to be any cocky at all. She'd come to me and said, "Hey, I was like, hey, can I take a picture of you?" She's like, "Absolutely." And then we had a conversation afterwards, and she said, "This is natural to you." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's in my blood. Like it's like second nature to me."
I love hearing that. The one question I have is, seeing that you've been in this business as long as you have you gone international at all? Worked internationally?
No, I would love to have the opportunity to. I want to. There's a bunch of I got a few connections over in England. That's something that is something different to me. I haven't been able to leave the country
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, in this last year, yeah. Now the English scene there's a really good independent scene
Oh yeah,
flourishing right now out
yeah.
there. Yeah.
A lot of the English scene. Like there's one that I think it's called Lucha Libre over there. It's real nice
Yeah.
of that nature, but it's real nice. I watched a show over there just recently, and their talent is pretty raw, like really
Yeah.
good. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've seen wrestlers at the youngest age of 17 wrestle, but
Yeah.
when you're watching what the age that they are then compared to what they are now,
Mm-hmm.
it's like a whole different spectrum. Like you're going from I'm super green to holy crap, this guy was this bad at this age. Now look at him, he's like 22 years old and he's doing stuff that I never thought he would be able to do.
Right.
Now, we're going to get ready to wrap this up in a minute, but Mark, I just want to, make sure that people understand that Kitty Adams was, we're not just talking about somebody who worked a couple of indie shows here or there. Kitty Adams actually had a pretty good career, and the problem is that generation, a lot of times information is hard to find. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I said, there are some big matches from Madison Square Garden you can find on YouTube, and man, you want to talk about a heel? Dude, she was nasty.
She was the meanest of the mean, I'm telling you. Actually, I have a second here. Let me show you. Oh, well, I can't really show you. I can actually give you some information. She had over 200 plus matches, and they were all over the place. And I've never thought of all the matches that she had. There's a bunch of her portfolio.
And I just want to make a comment too, is like, because we live in a different generation now where you actually have full-time promotions with just ladies wrestlers and women wrestlers.
Yes.
Back then, there would be one match featured on a card, and it wasn't even every card. It was like every once in a while they'd be this featured attraction. So there wasn't that much work for the ladies in that generation.
Back then. And that's some of the things that I've come to realize. Like some of these, these female wrestlers nowadays, they're not. Some of them do. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of them they don't actually understand that the older generation has helped get you where you are now.
Right. And
that's the thing that gets to me is they don't understand that, and they have to grasp it and understand. Hone, or not just hone, but get the conception of where they came from and how it came about.
And growing up back then, like you said, there was only be like maybe one match per card, but there'd always be like women's only promotions that would launch and then they'd fizzle out within like a few months to a year. But right now, it seems like the whole women's wrestling thing has really progressed, and it is a positive thing because I think women's wrestling is at a pretty good peak right now.
Yeah, it is at peak, and it is. So,
all right, Andy.
So I have. This is a little bit of a background of my grandmother. She's got 60 years of in-ring experience. She debuted in 1960. So she's got over 62 matches just in the United States. Her final match was in 94. That was 92, excuse me. And it was an independent promotion in Florida. She went over. I think it was Lillian Kai or
Leilani Kai.
Yeah,
was that it? Yep.
Yeah.
From WWF Women's Champion.
Yep. She's got belts too. She's got, I forgot what belt she had. It was an independent promotion. As a matter of fact, she worked for NWA. She worked for WWF. As a matter of fact, hold on a second. Let me get this one pulled up real quick. And then she did a battle royal for the NWA. And that was her last match on television was in 1978,
Oh, excuse me, 79. It was a battle royal where she was actually going over with Fabulous Moolah, and as a matter of fact, she just put over Fabulous Moolah, and it was between Fabulous Moolah and Vivian St. John for the final two. So
Very
it's
cool.
yeah, it takes a long, between her and my grandfather, it's something that I want to grasp, and I want to not just inform the people out there that, this is what they did, but I'm also doing it too. And I'm actually taking after it, and I'm walking the same footsteps they walked.
Right.
Yeah, I'd love to know more about your grandfather at another time. Again, this is more to focus on you and your grandmother, but I'd like to have you on again to talk about your grandfather at some point.
Oh, absolutely.
And anytime you want to come on to promote your shows, just give us a buzz.
Well, hell, I'm gonna do one real quick. Gentlemen, I do have a show. I actually am the owner, CEO, however you want to put it, of Outlaw Wrestling, based in West Virginia. Our first show is February 13th. We have a 6-match card. I actually have a battle royal to commemorate my grandmother. It's going to be intergender, actually, which is going to be, it's different. I've never done an intergender battle. It's going to be something different. But I have a bunch of independent local scene guys. I got myself. I'm in the main event. I'm facing 2 other gentlemen, which are local to the area. I got Rocky Rage and Aaron West that I'm facing in the main event. Then I have a couple of Florida guys coming up. Over there, I got two big names from. I've got the Controversial Inc. coming up from Florida. They're doing a tag match, and then I have Johnny Zeke, a big game Johnny Zeke facing the face of death himself, Zayden Kane. So keep an eye out. We're going to be doing it at 6 p.m. is bell time. One come all and shoot it up. It up, enjoy, and have a blast. That's all I'm going to tell you.
All right, so I see here that you do have a Pro Wrestling Tees store, the One Man Army Death Mark.
That's me.
Go check that out. Get all your Death Mark T-shirts. And is there any other social media you would like to plug?
I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Check me out. I have my Facebook's the One Man Army Death Mark. There's a reason behind that name. And then you can catch me out at The Real MST on YouTube. I do have a couple of YouTube videos. I'm actually looking to be posting some more as well. So keep an eye out. Keep it on the rise, because Death Mark's coming to you. Boom. That's all I'm going to say.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us.
You gentlemen have a nice night, all right?
Been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.